November 18th, 2024 P and Z work session meeting is called to order at 5 p.m. Does anyone wish to make a comment? Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. We will have a timer for your reference. Please state your name and city of residence for the record.
Favor from, I need to ask during this workshop, I'm not allowed to ask, but. And my good friend here. Right now.
And if we may, maybe before Mr. Lytle continues, can y'all check, make sure your mics are on? Yeah, okay.
There's what?
All right. Thank you. There we go.
All right, if one of you would be so kind as to ask Mr. Chandler, why on your workshop with all the listing of the upcoming planning and zoning requests, there are so many of them that were dated at least last year, and some of them at least seems like were 18 months ago. Why it's taking so long for them to get to you? Thank you.
Thank you.
Your turn.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yes, I believe Mr. Lytle is referring to the director's report. And so those are active and recent cases in which, we also are coming back to you all to give the most recent actions at city council, mainly on the zoning cases, but a lot of those are plats that if it's showing that it's say it went to development review committee a year ago or something to that effect, means the ball is in their court. There's something that they need to do. The timing is based on their needs, not on ours. So it's a great question. But yes, when you look at the director's report, we typically have about a year and a half of cases, and we want you to see kind of a representative level of cases that are coming forward, because a lot of them are minor plats that you all don't even see. But at the same time, if there is something if there's a timeline that doesn't make sense, it's because the applicant has decided for whatever reason that they're not ready to move forward.
When do you make the decision, Brian, just for the record, to drop them off your list?
Oh, it's it usually around the beginning of the year, we'll take a look at it and say, all right, well, maybe we need to cut off the 2022 cases or something. But
Okay.
If there's anything that you all see in terms of, hey, these are the cases we want to see, the others are just cluttering the packet, hey, we'd love some guidance. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Michael Steinheimer. My residence is 1005 South 13th in Temple, Texas. And I'm here to address regular agenda item 4. That's FY 2452ZC, which is a public hearing concerning rezoning request for 2-family plan development to permit an accessory dwelling at 1104 South 11th Street. I own 2 adjacent properties along with other folks to that particular address, Belcad 111537 and Belcad 76201. Both are on South 13th Street, 1017 South 13th and 1005 South 13th. If there was fencing, fencing placed along the west boundary of this property on 11th, it would impact my 1017 directly because there is a gate that is access for 1017. Its gate's been there since probably about 1980. And there's also an apartment on the 1005. The only access or entrance for that apartment and the parking area for that apartment is on the east side in the alley of what is West Avenue K, which is immediately to the north of this property on South 11th. And parking as well as fencing would definitely impede not only the care for that dwelling, but also access to that dwelling and ability for that resident to, he's a disabled individual, and people come and give him rides to various things. And so it would impede his way to, to in some address, especially automobiles parking along the west side of the property where the new house is located, or the new dwelling is located. All these, our house has been there for 100 years. The house on 1017, I don't think it's only been there maybe 80 or 90 years at most. I don't know how long 11th Street how long the street is on 11th Street has been there, but it's been there at least since 1978. And they're good neighbors. We've never had any problems with them. We're not opposed to adding another dwelling, although this appears to be a case of forgiveness rather than permission. Apparently, they remodeled the front dwelling. It looks very nice. And while they were doing that, they laid a concrete pad and built a third dwelling or second dwelling on the back of the property. But we're not opposed to that. We're not opposed to another family moving into that area. And so, we're there'll be 3 families on this lot, but we're not opposed to that. The folks that live there now are quiet. I see no reason that the folks that would move into the new little apartment wouldn't be just as quiet and just as neighborly as and in fact, it's the other folks that watch their movies late Sunday night. But anyway, that's their personal business. But anyway, so we're mainly speaking against privacy fencing and where you allow the parking, but we're not opposed to allowing them to get a permit so they can hook that up and to electricity and have a family move in there. Okay, so I thank you for your consideration to that matter.
Thank you.
And
Mr.
she left
Steinmeier.
because she owns it too.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, sir.
We'll turn the meeting over to Brian Chandler, our planning.
Yes, and just for the record, since he was talking about an item on the case, which on one of these cases, yes, Commissioner Morales has abstained
Yeah.
on that one, and so she removed herself from this part of the discussion as well. And so the other, well, that is, we have a consent agenda with let's see, 3 different plats.
We need to
Sorry.
bring her back in, Brian.
We should, yes. Judy? Come on back. Thank you. So yeah, before we talk about that case for 1104 South 11th, we do have 2 plats that are on consent. Number 4, that's the final plat of Solomon Estates. And number 5, final plat for Rental Ranger Estates. Any questions on those? Otherwise, they'll remain on consent. And you can still answer questions and keep them on consent, but. Okay. All right. So, just a little bit more about number 7, Mr. Steinheimer is talking about. That is what was actually, I don't know, could have been built for as an original duplex. That structure has been there a long time, but it's the additional accessory dwelling unit in the back that is before you. And yes, he's correct. They had a permit for the duplex to renovate it, and they may have even had a shed permit, but one way or another, they exceeded the scope of their permit. You know, they turned a shed into an accessory dwelling unit. It was stopped before they were to finish. And so a stop work order has been in place for over a year now. And so we've been working with them to determine whether that is a use and a structure that we could support in looking at the comprehensive plan, neighborhood plans for the area, and with a site plan. So this is a plan development to allow this with some conditions that staff could support. Y'all will have an opportunity to look at the parking. The fence is something that, based on input from the neighbors, we have removed that as a condition for approval, because originally thought that that would be helpful to have the screening, but with concerns about that fence potentially blocking access to another unit to the rear, the applicant was happy to not have to build a fence as well. So it sounds like that is something that staff can support, removing that request for the privacy fence. There's already a chain link fence there. So anyway, you'll see the site plan, and we can have more discussion about it at that time and look at the parking and all that good stuff. So any questions on that? Okay. All right. If you wouldn't mind pulling up my presentation, just that includes recent council actions. And then let's see. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
All right, so we're just gonna roll from recent council actions into the board member toolkit. And so, Chair Krause, this is what you were talking about, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. I didn't want to make sure I wasn't giving a presentation on something
No.
other
it's
than
just-
what you were
just the
talking about.
Toolkit.
Okay, excellent. So we'll do a brief overview on that. I've given you a copy of my slides, which are just screenshots of the highlights from this document that all of you should have from your manual that we put together binder. And I believe it's in just one of the pockets. And if you don't have it, then let us know and we'll get you a copy. All right, but before that, let's give an update on the South Point rezoning, and this is a pretty self-explanatory one. You'll remember this is a Case Road, self-explanatory, but not so self-explanatory that I wouldn't prefer having my slide to refer to. Anybody got any extra batteries?
Just make sure he's got.
All right, let's just advance in the meantime, but before the next one.
Make sure the focus is on that. Brian, you trying again, or is it?
I use this at council that it
I'm
needs
just gonna make
batteries.
sure that we clicked on this, so this is the active window, and then that will be on.
Yeah.
Nothing?
It's dead.
Okay.
All right. See, this is what happens when Kathy isn't here. She's the battery person.
There's a USB that was not put. Because there was logic. There you go.
Okay,
That's
or
what it
plug,
was.
or plug in. Yeah.
Somebody unplugged the
Okay, thank you.
receiver.
All right, so Case Road, South Point subdivision, and you will remember this one. It was approved, no controversy. This was essentially just allowing for the proposed single family to be developed as single family and have the entire lot zoned accordingly. And then the general retail to the south, same thing, to have it all general retail as opposed to a sliver as single family. So then we had the 2 conditional use permits for package stores. And so the first one on West Avenue M. And so more controversial certainly than the previous one. And you'll remember that neighbors came out and gave their input based on concerns from transients that were already apparently buying beer at the convenience store, the same part of the same complex, and hanging out in the alleys behind their houses. And either way, the input was considered by council. We actually changed our staff recommendation between P and Z and council to reflect the new information that was provided and further evaluation of the neighborhood plan to say, you know what? We really need to take a closer look at that. So we actually changed our recommendation from approval to denial, which is unusual. We don't typically do that, but if the neighbors bring up points that were not considered and to evaluate additional data, then then that's what we did here, is to evaluate and say, we agree with the neighbors that that is not a good idea, and agree with you all because you recommended against it. And so council approved your recommendation, and that is to essentially disapprove the CUP at that location. But the other one, much less controversial, it was interesting to have both those CUPs on the same agenda because they couldn't be more different. One really in the middle of a neighborhood, although on an arterial Avenue M, but backing up to homes in a fairly dense neighborhood. The other one at the little shopping center just to the north of HEB on 31st Street. And no controversy. Certainly the neighbors that are all commercial didn't have any concerns. You all didn't have any concerns with your unanimous recommendation of approval, and council agreed with your recommendation or lack of concerns. And so those are the cases that went to council week before last. Any questions on any of them? And so that is really, part of that item description in our workshop agenda, referencing the director's report and other cases. That information is usually on the director's report, but to be able to point it out, have a conversation about it, have some images to share, but it's also an opportunity if you have any other questions about any of the information Mr. Lytle was asking about in the director's report, what's the status of this or that, you're welcome to ask. All right. So we'll just roll right into board member toolkit. And once again, this is what it looks like. I think yours might be color. I don't know. Mine's black and white, but in your binder. And so this is information that the city attorney's office, and Kyle, you may not be aware of this, but because this happened before Kyle joined the legal team here, but they would give orientation presentations to all the boards and commissions, especially when the city was going through an update on its board and commission policies. Commissioner Morales, I'm sure, remembers it very well. She was on council during that time. And so it's a great question by Chair Krause in terms of, okay, well, perhaps we all need to take a look at this and absolutely agree. And so this is going to be just an abbreviated version of what you have in your binder. But, looking at the appointment process and you all interviewed for this position that is not the best paying, but is rewarding in other ways. So just a reminder that there are essentially 2 cycles for all boards and commissions to get appointed. There's one in March and there's one in September. And so planning and zoning is the September cycle. And so when council approves it, the new board members in September, then their term begins the first meeting in October. And so once again, this is all in the packet, but just hitting the highlights that multiple service. So you all can be on other boards. Raise your hand if you're on another board concurrently with this one. All right. Thank you, Commissioner Morales. And I know others of you have been on additional boards, but the policy just specifies that you're limited to 2 at any time. And employee appointments, we're not eligible. There were employees that were on different boards. And so idea is, city employees or our staff, we've got plenty of good candidates to be able to fill those positions without having a potential conflict of interest with, staff agendas. Removal, essentially, hey, I don't think it's nothing to point out here other than you don't follow the rules, you could be removed. I'm not concerned about any go. And a section called good governance and commitment and code of conduct. I think the highlight here is that essentially you look at this as a full board. Your opinions are important, but in terms of you're representing the entire board as well when you're here. Now, when you're out in public, your opinions are your own, and you don't make a representation that, hey, this is what the board thinks. But just to look at it collectively of, hey, your group of diverse experiences and opinions, all come together, but in the form of the group. So there's no I in team. All right. Let's see. Sorry, I'm gonna have to. I highlighted these things. It looks so much bigger on my computer. So yeah, just some highlights. Certainly in terms of of why you're on the board, to give back, kind of a type of community service and represent the community that you live in and presumably love. But specifically, and I mentioned this in the last slide, but members should be careful to represent the majority views of their individual board or commission. Individual opinions to the public and press should be identified as such. Also, dressing in a professional manner. I'm not pointing this out to you all because that's an issue. I'm honestly pointing this out because years ago we'd have builders on the board that sometimes would have like torn up t-shirts or raggedy t-shirts, and even some would have like their dip cup on the counter. And so it's one of those that don't know if that's why this policy has been put in place, but I'm sure it contributed to it. So I don't see that issue with any of y'all. Also, members have a duty to vote and must do so in either the affirmative or in the negative. And so this is just a reminder that in your role, council is relying on you all to provide your guidance. And so as part of your responsibility, it's to come prepared, review the packet and take a stand, essentially, affirmative or negative. So if you're to abstain, it's because there's a conflict of interest or a perceived conflict of interest or potential, and then an abstain form is submitted, but otherwise you're here to vote. All right, and attendance. So this is really just to reaffirm what you all already know as our attendance policy. This applies to all boards and commissions. It's not just P&Z. And that is essentially, within a calendar year to have attended at least 50% of the meetings. If you miss 3 consecutive meetings without an excused absence, which those excused absences for, work or illness, they're all in the policy, but essentially those come through us. You know, if you reach out and say, hey, I'm gone for work. I'm ill, I'm taking care of my sick kids, whatever the case may be, those are excused. If there's a question of whether the absence is to be excused, then we will defer to the chair. So Chair Krause would make that call. We haven't needed to send any of those to you. And honestly, if it's just one, it's probably if you had missed two in a row and this is your third, the previous two were unexcused and it was kind of a gray area as to whether the third one is excused, then that's probably when we'd call on Chair Krause. Also, the section about if the board member has a conflict of interest per chapter 171 of the Texas Local Government Code. I mean, you know the process. Y'all have been very good about submitting those forms, or if you have questions as to whether there is a conflict of interest, to ask staff, planning staff or Kyle, so ultimately, if we have a question about whether a abstention is necessary, we're going to check with Kyle. All right, so City Council has a liaison that is designated for each board or commission. And so you all may or may not know that Councilmember Grant, District 2, council member, she is our council liaison. She attends a number of these, sometimes virtually, sometimes in person. And so, that's why she is, responsible for keeping up with what's going on. So if there's a question by council, then they can also look to her in terms of, hey, what was, do you know what the intent of this decision might have been, if it's something that staff can't answer. But also every board or commission has a city staff liaison. And so I am technically yours. But I've got lots of great staff that help in that process. Everyone here has a role. And so it may be me, but it's really, the entire team. So it really should say, or designee. And what we haven't gone over, especially for the new ones, is that there's a work plan, and it's some simple action steps per the strategic plan that get evaluated annually. And so that gets reported for, I guess it's the August update. So before new members start or are appointed in September and then start in October, Liz Caraway, she's the Assistant City Secretary. She gives that presentation to council at a workshop. In August, of course, is the P&Z update, along with those others on previous slide that are on that cycle. And to be able to present what what the work plan is, those three, the goals or the action steps, it's very short. And I probably should have included that in here. Perhaps at the next meeting, I can present that section that Liz presented to council in August. But yeah, so that annual report, that's what that is all about. And of course, meeting procedures, officers, you all know about that. We got a chair and a vice chair. What we haven't discussed is that there's an opportunity for standing committees. You can see that section there, that if there was a need, if you all wanted to establish a standing committee to evaluate, a particular planning and zoning issue, then you have that option. But it just clarifies that it's subject to the Open Meetings Act as well. And of course, the agenda, minutes, quorum, public participation, you all know that very well. We don't need to go over any of that. And compliance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. And that's, of course, we talk about not replying to to all when we have emails because of the potential to have a walking quorum. If you're replying to something, a case on the agenda, then it could be considered a quorum and a violation of the Texas Public Open Meetings Act. But of course, that also applies in person. So, there's a reason why those committees are, I think, two people, I think is established, but essentially don't call up the commissioners and ask their opinion on a case, because your responsibility is to have that conversation in the open meeting and not behind closed doors. Now, if the applicant approaches you and has questions, you are welcome to answer those questions. But what we recommend is that you defer that person to us, even if it's a close friend. I mean, either way, we know that you got a close friend and feels like you can answer their questions, going to do that. But don't start polling the other commissioners. Kind of common sense. Public Information Act deals less with your realm, and that's more about public documents and making sure that that all documents submitted to the city are accessible by the public, and the amount of time that we have to respond to those. So generally, that's not something that y'all would get involved with. Legal liability. I thought this was interesting, just in terms of personal liability, that as long as you are in good faith, kind of representing the interests of the board and representing city council as an appointee, you don't have personal liability. And really the same applies to kind of overall board liability, that you're evaluating your decisions based on the good for the community and not the good for you as an individual. And that's really it. Boy, I went over, didn't I? So any questions that can't wait till the next workshop?
I don't believe so. Thank you, Brian,
Okay,
for doing
thank you.
that. May I have a volunteer for? Thank you, Judy. Commissioner Morales will give the invocation. May I have a volunteer for the pledge? Commissioner Carney will do the pledge. We will now hear from Tiffany Harrison in regard to affidavits.
Commissioners, for the record, one affidavit to abstain has been received for this meeting. Is this correct? Thank you.
Is there any additional business? If not, the work session is closed at 5:32 p.m.